Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to another game making tutorial. This isn't a game maker tutorial. This is going to be a tutorial on the Godot engine. I'm going to pronounce it Godot because their logo is a robot and they rhyme, and also because I've seen the developers and they pronounce it Godot. So that's why I'm choosing to. Other people like to pronounce it Godot or Godot because of the story, the play. You can look that up if you want to, but I'm choosing to pronounce it Godot. Now, I'm not going to quit Game Maker, so don't worry about that. There's more Game Maker videos coming soon, and I'm excited to get those to you, so don't worry about that. I just want to show you guys some of the things that Godot can do. I've been learning it. I quite like the engine. It's free and open source. Some of the things I like about it is that it runs on PC, well, I guess Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So it will run on all three natively, so no matter what system you're using, you can start using this engine. And that's kind of cool. It's free and open source. I don't remember if I said that already or not. So you can go to go.engine.org and you can download version 2.0. And it's a pretty nice little engine for being free and open source. So you can donate here if you like the engine. I recommend donating to them to help with the future of the project since it's free. So just go to download and download the engine. It should just give you a single file that you run. And once you've done that, you can run the engine and you should come up with a screen something like this. Now, I changed the font size, so there's a few little glitches because of that, because of the font size change that I did. I made it quite large to make it better for tutorial videos. So you may see those come up, but I didn't have any issues when I had the smaller font size, and I didn't mind their font size, I just needed it bigger for tutorial videos. So we're going to do a new project, and we're going to browse the project path and go. I've already created a folder called projects, so I'm going to go into that folder, and then I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to name this folder Die Bricks Video, and then I'm just going to press open and hit create. Okay, so I've got this project right here, Die Bricks Video. Now, if you guys want to see what we're going to be making in this series, I can show you that. Let me run the project real quick. It is a simple Breakout clone. And you can see we've got a ball moving around. We can destroy the bricks, and we can aim where the ball goes based on where it hits the paddle. So the player has control over that. So pretty cool, simple little project that we're going to be doing for our first Godot project. So let's open up Die Bricks Video, and it will open up the Godot editor. And you can see Godot supports both 2D and 3D. It's native 2D, which is really nice. So we're going to be switching to 2D. And this is your scene. Now your scene is kind of like your level, your game level. There's a lot more that you can do with the scene than just use it as a level, but we're not going to go into all of that right now. Now, if you want to, you can run your game by pressing the run button right here, but we don't actually have anything inside of here, and this scene isn't actually saved. So over here on the left, you can see this little area. This is the resource. Well, this is the tree for the elements inside of the scene. And down here is the file system. And then over here on the right is the inspector. So when we click on, it's called a node. When you click on a node inside of the tree over here, the inspector will give you information on that node. So I'm going to create a new node, and you can use this little icon right here. Now every scene needs a base node. So we're just going to do node 2D, and this will be our base node. It's a node that doesn't really do very much. It has some properties attached to it, but not a lot. So I'm going to name this world because it's the base node that all of our other nodes will be in. You want to make sure, as you look over here, you can see the information on this node. you'll want to make sure that its position is set to 0, 0, right up here in the top corner. Okay, now we're just going to hit Control S to save this scene. And I like to organize my project, so I'm going to do Create Folder and name this folder Scenes. Okay, and then I'm going to name this scene level1.xml. You can save the scene as a few different types here, but I like XML because it's easier to edit later, or if you're using version control like Git, it's much easier. Okay, we have our level. Now we don't have a lot going on inside of this level yet, so let's get started with that. The first thing we're going to want to do is create the paddle. So click on the world node that we have and click new node. And we're going to create one of the physics bodies. If you type in body, it will give you the different physics bodies that you can use inside of Godot. Now there are 3 main physics bodies, and we're going to use all 3, and part of the reason I chose this example as the first tutorial was because it will teach you how to use the different physics bodies. So a static body is kind of like it's a physics object that would be solid. It's not going to move at all, but it will prevent other physics bodies from entering the area. But you shouldn't move it. It's generally not intended to be moved. So this will be a good one for our bricks. A kinematic body is a body that collides with other physics objects, but it doesn't actually have physics properties that move it, like forces that move it. It's designed for player characters where you might want to have that character collide with the other physics objects, but you want to control its physics and have it have a simplified version of physics. So maybe you have your own gravity so that you can do something like a ledge grab. So that's the reason you'd want to use a kinematic body. A rigid body is just a normal physics object. It's going to move, it's going to have forces applied to it, and it's going to react according to those forces and properties. So for the paddle, we're going to want to use the kinematic body because we don't really want it to have a gravity. We don't want it to have all the properties of a physics object, but we want our physics, the other physics objects, to be able to interact with it like the ball. So select the kinematic body 2D and rename this paddle. Okay? So we have our paddle, it's in the world, but we can't see it because it's just an empty node. So now if we want to see this node, we'll want to attach a sprite to it. Now, when you create a new node, it will create it as, you can see that the paddle is now a parent of the or a child of the world node. So every time you create a new node, it's going to add it as a child to one of the other nodes. And it's going to do that depending on which one you have selected. So we want to select the paddle node, and we want to do create new node. That way, this new node will be a child of the paddle node. And I'll show you what that does. So look up Sprite and choose Sprite right down here. Make sure it's the blue one. You don't want Sprite 3D. So Sprite, and you can just leave it named Sprite. Now I'm going in the description, there's going to be a Dropbox link where you can download the resources to this. So I'm actually going to go get them right now. I have those resources. So if I come into Documents and inside of Godot, Projects, Bricks, Sprites. Okay, so there's 3 sprites here. I'm just going to copy these. You should already have these. And I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to create a new folder, and name it Textures or Sprites. I'll do it Textures. Oops, I want an S on there. Textures. And then I'm going to paste those inside of here. So I've got ball, brick, and paddle for those textures. Now you can see that they'll show up down here inside of our file system. Here's textures. If we go inside of here, we have these 3 textures. Okay, now when we select the sprite node, you can see it has a texture property, but it's set to null. So click on that and do load, and go into textures and do paddle. Now you can see up here, if we scroll to zoom in, middle click to pan. If we scroll to zoom in, we've got our paddle, but it's pretty small compared with the rest of the room here. So we're going to do a couple things. Number 1, we're going to scale it. So make sure you've got the sprite selected and come over here and switch the scale to 2 and 2 and press enter. There we go. It is scaled. Now what we're going to do is change the viewport size because it's actually pretty large. So if we go to scene and then go to project settings and then display, you can see some information on the display. We're going to set the width and the height, and I'm going to do 640 by 360. We've got a nice width and height. We'll press close. Now you can see it updates the width and height of our scene right here. And we're ready to go that way. Now let's save the scene, and we're going to move the paddle, but I want to set snap inside of the scene. So if you come to edit right here, click show snap or use snap, and then show grid, and then configure snap. You can see mine's a little messed up here because of the scaling. And we're going to do a grid step of 16. Actually, I might be able to do 32 and 32 for now. There we go. And then we select the paddle, but you want to make sure that you don't select the sprite node, because you can select the sprite node and move it, but we don't want to. We want it to be attached to the paddle. So we're going to lock it. That will prevent us from selecting the sprite node. But now we can select the paddle node and move it around in the room. I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to save the scene just using Control S. And then you can see I can press this little run button and it will run the scene, and there we go. We've got the paddle inside of the scene, but we can't do anything with it yet. I'm gonna move it down one more so it's a little lower. Now we can't use this play button. It says no main scene has ever been defined. Select one from the project settings under the application category. I see. So we haven't defined our main scene. That's the starting scene. But if we go to scenes and we go to project settings, you can see under application, right where it told us, there's a main scene. We'll click that and then select a file and go into scenes and select level 1. Now our main scene is selected. If we press this run, it will just run the game automatically, and you can now hit F5 to run the game as well. Now let's add the ball in. So click on the world node. That way when we add this new node, it will be a child of the world. And we're going to add, type in body, we're going to add a rigid body 2D because that's what we're going to use for the ball. Okay, name this ball. And then I'm going to add a new node to it, make sure it's selected, and I'm going to do a sprite. And I'm going to select a texture, load texture, the ball, and I'm going to scale it. I'm going to give it a scale of 4 actually. Now it's all fuzzy, and you probably are like, why is it fuzzy? Well, if you come up to texture up here, you can see there's a little arrow. Click on this arrow, and you can see Godot has generated some flags here. Now the reason is because 3D games, these flags are really useful for making 3D textures look a little bit better without actually having to have large textures. So, but we don't want them in a 2D game because they mess up our pixel art. So we're going to come in here and we're going to uncheck mip maps and we're going to uncheck filter because we don't need either of those. Now you can change the default way that it imports textures so that you don't have to uncheck that for every single one. But I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. I'm just going to uncheck both of them on these two images. Okay? Okay, click on the sprite for the ball and we're going to lock it as well. Make sure you lock it. Then we're going to click on the ball and we're going to drag it right above the paddle here. Now because this ball is a physics object, you can see when we click on it, we already get information about it over here. So it has a weight, it has a bounce, it has gravity, a bunch of information. We're going to change these properties. We're going to change the bounce to 1 so that it bounces. We're going to set the gravity to 0. And we're going to set the gravity scale to 0. And we're going to set the linear and angular dampening override to 0 because this will make, these two things will make it so that the ball kind of slows down as it's moving through the air and kind of adds air friction, air resistance, I guess. We don't want that, so we want to turn those off because we want this ball to continue moving at the same speed that it starts out as, unless we tell it to otherwise. And then we're going to set, if you scroll down a little more, you can see, let's see, where is it? Oh, velocity, here we go. So we've got our velocity and our linear velocity. We're going to set this to 200 in the X and negative 200 in the Y. And save our scene. Now when we press F5, the ball flies off in that direction, right? Looking pretty good. But it doesn't bounce off the edges of the room. So we need to create those walls to make it bounce off the edges of the room. So click on the world and add a new node. And we're going to do the last body that we haven't done yet, which is the static body, the one that doesn't move. And we're going to name this walls. Now, currently our walls, they don't actually have any sort of a collision attached to them, and neither does our ball or paddle. So we need to make sure that they have a collision attached to them so that the game knows kind of the area that they take up inside of the physics world. So with our wall, we're going to add a new node. And if you type in poly, you should get a collision polygon 2D right here. And this is what we want. Now that we've attached this collision polygon 2D, I'm just going to rename it collision. And now that we've done that, we can actually draw this polygon that will make up the collisions. So if you click this little edit button here, you can see that it's only available when we're actually on this polygon node, the collision polygons. But if you click this right here, we can actually start drawing a polygon. I'm going to start just below the room on this green line here and draw a nice big wall that surrounds the outside of the room. And let's actually try that again. Let's turn off editing here. Because it didn't seem to work. So let's try this one more time. Make sure your snap is set. Yep, snap is on. Click on the collision. We'll try again. Okay, come around the outside edge here. There we go. Okay. Not sure why it didn't complete it last time, but it seems just clicking over here and redoing it seemed to have worked. Okay, so our walls now have a collision, right? They're done. But the ball and the paddle don't, so we need to add one for those two. So let's start with the ball. Click on the ball node, click create new node, and we're going to do collision shape 2D instead of polygon, because the ball is just a square. So over here, we will change the node name to collision. And over here, we can create a new shape. You can see it says shape and it's null. We're going to create a rectangle shape, and that creates a collision, but it's too big. It's bigger than the ball. Now we could use these little red dots here to edit it, but make sure you don't use the outside red dots, because these outside ones will scale it, and scaling collision shapes doesn't work. Not if you're using these outside ones or the scale. You want to make sure you use the inside dots. But if you want to be 100% sure you're doing it right, click this little arrow over here and you can just change the extents. So I'm going to change these to 4 and 4 maybe. Yeah. So 4 and 4. And that gets us the exact shape we need for the ball. So now let's save and run the game. And that wasn't exactly how we wanted that to work, right? It hit the wall, but then the ball started spinning and kind of weird stuff was going on. So we want to prevent the ball from spinning. So click on the ball here, on the ball node, and you can see that it has a mode. If we set it to character mode, that will prevent the ball from rotating when it hits stuff. And that's what we want. We also want to turn off the friction, because you could see there was enough friction that it stopped the ball's movement when it hit the wall. So we're going to turn friction off. Now let's try running our game and see what happens. Okay, that's more like how we want the ball to bounce, but it didn't hit our paddle. So let's fix that. Come onto the paddle, add a node. We know how to do this. Collision shape 2D, and rename it collision. We're going to give it a new shape, which is going to be a rectangle. And we're going to change its extents, because that's the easy way to solve this problem. So we're going to do 36 maybe. 40. 40 on the X, and 4. Is 4 too small? 4 on the Y. Nope, looks like 4 is just right. So 40 on the X, 4 on the Y. Okay, now our paddle has a collision attached to it. So when the ball comes down, it'll bounce off the paddle. So we've already got the collisions and physics working for this game. Really cool looking. That's all we're going to do in this tutorial. I'm going to do, this is probably going to be at least a 2-part series, maybe a 3-part series. So in the next series, I'm going to help you write your first line of code inside of the engine to where we can move the paddle around inside of the room. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video. You can appreciate this engine that's a little bit different from GameMaker, and I hope to show you guys more of it and the things that I like about it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure and like, favorite, and subscribe. Check out my website. There's a link in the description, and I appreciate you guys' support. I'll talk to you guys later.